Talking about the Beis Hamikdash, we spoke about the difference between the first and the second, and please God, the third Beis Hamikdash. Here's an interesting thing. The Torah tells us that the location of where the Beis Hamikdash would eventually be built is referred to multiple times at different periods in early Jewish history. So if you have a look, for example, Avraham, he referred to the place that the Beis Hamikdash would stand as a mountain. Bahar Hashem Yeroeh, the mountain at which Hashem will reveal himself. And that obviously is in the context of the Akedah, which is the time that Avraham took his son Yitzchak, and he was willing at least to sacrifice him to Hashem, and at the last minute Hashem said, okay, fine, this was just a test. So he names the place where that happened Har, a mountain of Hashem. Because of that, we see that there's an association between Avraham and that area, and of course the future Beis Hamikdash. Fast forward, and you have the story of Yitzchak. Yitzchak, we're told that just before he was about to meet his prospective wife, Rivka, so the Torah tells us, Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basodeh. He went to speak in the field. Speak in the field. Who did he go speak to in the field? So it says that refers to prayer. He went to pray out in the field. Much later on, when he wanted to bless his two sons, so you remember there was that whole scandal that Esav was supposed to get the brocha, and while he was out hunting, Yaakov was dressed in clothing that resembled Esav and Esav's actual clothes, but he had also these hairy skins on his arms, and he goes in, and when he comes in to get the brocha, Yitzchak is kind of surprised. How do you get back here so quickly, and so on and so forth. And then he says, I don't get what's going on over here, because Hakol kol Yaakov hayodayim yidei Esav. He says the voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the hands feel hairy like the hands of Esav. And then he says something very interesting. He says, Re'ei reach beni, look, can you see the aroma, the scent of my son? It's very strange that a person should speak about seeing a scent. Anyhow, that's what he says. And he says it's kareach sodeh. It's like the scent of a field. So where did Yitzchak go to daven? He went to daven in a field. Now, when he refers to his son, he says he resembles the field asher berchoi Hashem, the field that Hashem has blessed. So the commentaries say, what is the field that Hashem has blessed? The Beis Hamikdash. Refers to the Beis Hamikdash. And so the implication of going out to speak to daven in the field is associated also with the Beis Hamikdash. So we see that Avraham has a connection to the Beis Hamikdash, and we see that Yitzchak has a connection to the Beis Hamikdash. When it comes the time of Yaakov, so Yaakov very famously has a dream of the ladder, and the ladder extends from the ground all the way to the heaven. Rashi gives a very intricate explanation of exactly where the ladder was positioned, that the bottom of the ladder was in one part of the southern Israel, and the middle of the ladder was over Jerusalem. It's a whole explanation that he gives. So Yaakov then says, wow, Ma noira hamokim hazeh, what an amazing, awe-inspiring place this is, because he had just suddenly seen this revelation of godliness. He says this is an awesome place, and again we're talking again about the spot where the Beis Hamikdash would be. Ein zeh ki'im Beis Elokim. This is nothing other than the house of Hashem. So Abraham calls it the mountain of Hashem, Yitzchak calls it the field of Hashem, and Yaakov calls it the house of Hashem. What's the difference? Well, both a mountain and a field are natural places, whereas a house is a structure, something that a human being, something that we've made. Also, the difference between, obviously nobody would say, I live on a mountain, or I live in a field. It's not a place for human habitat. Out in nature, that's a place for nature. Human beings, we want to have a bias, we want to have a house, a place of permanence. So much so that the Gemara goes so far as to say, Mi she'ein loy bias, ein loy ish. That if a person doesn't have a house, you're not even a full person. There's something fundamental lacking in the human experience if you don't have a home. So straight away you see that there's an implication over here that the nature by which Avraham referred to this area implied that it's not his perception, his relationship with the space is not of permanent godly revelation. And likewise, Yitzchak, the field, not permanent. Whereas Yaakov, his association with a place is bias. This is a place, a permanent residence of Hashem. So each of these three patriarchs were effectively describing the Beis Hamikdash in one of the three manifestations of the Beis Hamikdash. Avraham describes the Beis Hamikdash in its first incarnation, the first temple. What was the first temple? We've already discussed that the first temple was a place of incredible divine revelation. It was all, so to speak, on Hashem's terms. Hashem showered them with bracha and miracles and insight and exposure, but all of Hashem's doing. In other words, that was a place that was marked, you could say, by Hashem's kindness, because the nature of kindness is, it's really not about the recipient, it's all about the giver. If the person giving the kindness is a kind person, well, then you're going to receive a lot of kindness. Regardless of whether the recipient deserves it or doesn't deserve it, that's all tangential. The main thing is I'm kind. And that was the personality of Abraham. Abraham was a kind person. He didn't give you an interview when you arrived at his house. What kind of a person are you? Who's your background? Who's your family? Which shtetl are you from? No, you walked through his door. You washed your feet because he didn't want the dust of avodah zarah, of idolatry, to come through his door. And that was it. And he fed everybody equally. So Abraham, who is the person of chesed, he sees in the Beis Hamikdash, he sees that channel of Hashem's absolute kindness and just giving and giving and giving without limit. That's why he refers to it as a mountain. Throughout Tanakh, mountains are typically used as a symbol of tremendous love. Tremendous love. Just like a mountain rises up beyond what the eye can see. So love is something, that can take a person to places that you could never have imagined going. So Abraham's association with the Beis Hamikdash, which played out in the first Beis Hamikdash, is the gushing love of Hashem to us. We've already discussed previously that has a tremendous advantage, but it has a disadvantage, which is if it's not about us as the recipients, then it's quite likely that we won't appreciate what we have, and eventually we'll mistreat it, which is what happened, and so we lost the first Beis Hamikdash. Yitzchak was nothing like his father. They couldn't have been more different. Yitzchak did the exact opposite approach to godliness. It's not about love and kindness and just sharing with anybody regardless of what they may or may not deserve. Yitzchak was gevura. Gevura means there are rules, there are expectations. If you want to receive anything from Hashem, you have to earn it. You have to put in intense effort in order to get anywhere. You build from the bottom up. That was Yitzchak's attitude. So what did he see in the Beis Hamikdash? A sadeh, a field. You want a field to produce anything? You got to do it. The field's going to leave the field to its own devices, and it will be overrun with thorns and weeds. If you want the field to turn into something, you've got to plow the field, you've got to work the field, you've got to plant things, you've got to irrigate, you've got to prune. There's a lot of work that you have to do from the bottom up if you want this field to turn into anything. So Yitzchak, when he looks at the Beis Hamikdash, what does he see? This is a place of human endeavor. We've got to come forward, we've got to initiate, we've got to invest, we've got to do all the steps that humans have to do to construct a Beis Hamikdash from the bottom up. So his vision of the Beis Hamikdash was the second Beis Hamikdash, which is a place very much about human input and far less about Hashem's overwhelming, so to speak, unlimited goodness and kindness. We already discussed that there's a disadvantage to that kind of a Beis Hamikdash because humans are incapable of creating anything that can last forever. So if the whole Beis Hamikdash is built on human endeavor, it's only natural that over the course of time it will eventually run out. Even though while it lasts, it's more of a physical structure because there's more human input, and it might even last longer than the first Beis Hamikdash as it did because it's more invested and anchored in the physical realm, but it cannot last. Yaakov looks at the Beis Hamikdash, and Yaakov is midas ha'emes, as the verse says, titein emes liYaakov. Yaakov represents the trait of absolute integrity and truth. Whether you like it or not, Avraham and Yitzchak were both radicals. Avraham was a radical in the realm of kindness. Radical means that he behaved in a way that's extreme, and he was extreme with kindness. He was accommodating of the people of Sodom, and he wanted his son Yishmael to become a good guy. And he was extreme. He was radical in kindness. Yitzchak was radical in Gevurah. Tremendous expectation. Barely moved from where he lived. People had to come to him if they wanted to seek spiritual connection. Very radical to the opposite extreme. Yaakov is balance, truth, integrity. And the nature of integrity is that it doesn't waver. Because the nature of integrity, which is also associated with the element we call tiferes, which is the harmony of extreme positions, when you're in a healthy, true, committed place, then you know how to blend the right quantities of chesed and gevurah. You know how to create the right calibration of divine input and human input. And when you get that balance right, when you create a healthy environment, then there's no reason for the system to collapse. Systems only break down when systems are extreme. But if a system is healthy and a system is balanced and a system synchronizes all the different components, then the system will work. So in Yaakov's perception, the Beis Hamikdash is the harmony of Hashem's input with human input. Therefore, he sees it as a bias. He sees it as a house meaning a permanent structure, a structure that will endure the test of time, and that will never be destroyed. So Yaakov's perception of the Beis Hamikdash is the third Beis Hamikdash, the Beis Hamikdash that Mashiach will bring, which will have both of the components, as we've discussed over the last few days, the input of Hashem and the input of human being in perfect balance and harmony, and therefore it will last forever.